Every business owner is wasting time on low value items. As we think about this pyramid, on the very bottom level are those things that clearly do not serve your business. These are the things that you want to absolutely avoid doing. They still generated several $1,000,000 a year of profit from these businesses, but there were some that were worth tens of millions of dollars of profitability. It's a really straightforward thing to do, but most business owners, they get scared. They get afraid. Your business is there to get paid for profitably producing value for the market in a scalable way.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Hi, welcome to The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel. In this episode, I want to talk about how can you scale in a more strategic way. I want to share with you 6 decisions, a hierarchy, a framework that you can use to help your company gain greater growth without working longer hours or personally producing that part. When you think about scaling, where this is going to come from, I remember in the 90s, reading books by a guy by the name of Peter Drucker. Now, Peter Drucker was one of the most influential business thinkers from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s. He passed away several years ago, but his work is still fantastic. One of my favorite business books of all time is a book called The Essential Drucker, D-R-U-C-K-E-R. Why? It's a compendium of some of his best works, of excerpts from some of his best books for mass markets. He did a great job with what he did. And where this has been used is for almost 30 years now, I've been taking what I've learned from those early readings from the 90s and applying them to businesses that I've scaled, and through that, working with several thousand business coaching clients over the years. Our coaching staff uses the same mindset. So when we're working with a client, what we recognize is that every business owner is way too busy. And every business owner is wasting time on low value items. So when we're working with the business owner, we want to find places where they can gain greater leverage by focusing on fewer things, but those fewer things they focus on matter a whole lot more. And I'm going to share with you a 6-level hierarchy to help you make some of these choices. And I'm going to share with you where you get the energy, the resource, the time, the talent, the leadership, attention to free up to focus on your highest value things. And we'll do that here today. And I think probably the easiest way to start is I'm going to actually draw out a hierarchy here for you. I want you to think about this hierarchy. And we're going to use it as a pyramid because that's one way to think of a hierarchy. And as we think about this pyramid, on the very bottom level are those things that clearly do not serve your business. These are the things that you want to absolutely avoid doing. So for example, in your business life, these might be the markets that you do not want to serve. If you're a medical company, or we have a client who recognizes that there are certain insurance payers that they simply should not contract with because they reimburse way too low and they have limited capacity, they should just avoid these insurance payers. Or maybe in your manufacturing business, there are certain types of products that you just shouldn't be making. Or maybe for you, there are certain services that you should just avoid altogether, or certain niches that you really can't make. So for example, let's imagine you have a service business that could serve the educational market, the financial market, and could also serve the professional service firm market. Let's say those are 3 distinct use cases for what the service is that you have. And you might discover that the professional service market for you, service firm market, law firms, accounting practices, consulting practices, engineering practices, etc., or the financial services world, that you can have gross profit margins, the profit you've made before your below the line expenses, but after you pay for the direct cost of producing your service. And let's say you can make 60 and 65% respectively in these 2 markets, but the education niche, based on what they'll actually pay, you might be a 35 or 40% profit margin. Well, if that's the case and you have a limitation in terms of capacity, and you don't see a pathway to increase the gross profit margin on the education side, you're probably much better just avoiding the education market and focusing on these other two much more profitable markets to begin with. This is one of the things that we'll often talk with coaching clients, where we'll say, okay, when we look at your business, what's really the most important breakdown for you? If you look at how you look at your business, is the most important strategic choice right now going to be one of what product or service lines that you have? Is it about which location or locations should we focus on? Is it about which client or customers should we focus on, or about which markets should we serve or not serve? When they do this, what we'll often find is, by looking at it from a perspective, a lens of profitability, and your gross profit margin is by far the best metric to do that apples to apples comparison of profitability for each of those breakdowns. If that's the case, then you can narrow down to what makes you the most money, the one that you can serve and create the most economic value. Now, if you have any questions about gross profit margin, we've talked about it in past podcast episodes, so please go back and look for those episodes. I've given some really clean, clear past shows about that very thing. But staying with it for a moment, there are certain things that we should just avoid. And what we invariably find is we've got clients who end up spending way too much energy here, whether this energy is dollars or talent or even just attentional units. And they end up wasting this energy on things that they should not be spending it on. Moving up from there in our hierarchy, from the things that we should avoid, are the things that we're currently doing that we should immediately eliminate. These are actually worse, right? The things that we should avoid means let's just preempt it altogether. But what about, David, the things that we're already into that we recognize really aren't profitable for us? So I'll give a couple of examples. We have a construction company that we work with a lot of construction companies, but one in particular I'm thinking about. And they did different types of construction projects. When we first started working with them, they did remodels. They did outdoor living space. They did some repair and handyman or smaller projects, smaller scale projects under $10,000, $15,000 that needed to be done. They dabbled in doing some things like roofing and some other parts, but what they found for them is what they were best at and what was most profitable for them was actually the outdoor living space up. So they let go of these other parts. Now, they didn't just eliminate all of it immediately. Instead, they did the next one here, which is they picked some of these business lines for them, some of these service lines, to phase out. They were doing them, and it represented a significant portion of their business, but they let that phase out and die, and they put all their energy into their very better ones, which we'll get to in a moment here. So third is phase out. Above phase out, we have those things that we should just coast on. You might have a part of your business that's good. It's not great. It's good. It works. But you need to make sure that you don't give it your best resources. I'll give examples for that. Another one of our clients had an energy company, and they had, over a dozen different business lines that they had. And when we looked at it, there were certain business lines that they should just eliminate. Some of the business lines that they were thinking of getting in, they should have avoided. There were some business lines they should just let die a natural death, just let it phase out. But they had some business lines that were good businesses, profitable, but they weren't their best businesses. So they just said, look, we'll give our secondary talent to these ones to keep them going. They still generated several $1 million a year of profit from these businesses, but there were some that were worth tens of millions of dollars of profitability. And these higher two are the ones that you want to grow and scale. I'll talk about the difference between the two. So when you look at grow and scale, this is where your biggest profit opportunities are. And so in this energy company, there was one service line by far that required a lot of capital, but the return on capital was extraordinarily rich. And the profitability and the competitive space and the durability all lined up that this is where he should scale in. And that required some outside financing, some internal capital, but it was worth to inject. That's scaling. That's you taking and not just growing it organically, but through an infusion of energy and resources and capital and perhaps even some acquisition in times. That's scaling. The grow side says, how do we make sure we grow this organically? He had some other business units, there were two in specific, that were worth putting some of his talented leaders on to grow them organically. And this one required probably his best attention should be focused here because it had the largest, richest opportunity for him. So when you look at these 6 levels, the eliminate or avoid, what I find as a coach, invariably companies are wasting anywhere from 20 to 50% or more of their energy on these low value things that really they have no business putting energy on. This is the stuff that they should really be eliminating, staying out of. But a lot of times that was their legacy business. I'll give another example. One of the clients we coached for years, he ran originally a flooring company. I'm going to call him Joe because I don't want to share a name without permission on it. So Joe had a flooring company. And his flooring company, made him a couple $100,000 a year in profit, had sales of about $1.5 million, and that's when we met him. Now he had this fledgling other company that did a specialty type of work in fireplaces, initially in houses and in apartments. They would do these things, or in condo units and stuff. And that business originally was like about $600,000-$700,000 when we met him. We looked at the two. His flooring business had a lot of competition. People generally paid 30 to 90 days after the service was done, after they put in the flooring in the home. And it was a hyper-competitive market. But the fireplace company, he would have people drive to his showroom from 2 or 3 hours away because he was the only one that was really there of credibility. His margins were probably 20 to 30% higher. People paid cash up front for at least a 50% deposit with the balance due upon completion, or in many cases they paid all of it up front before he actually went and bought his materials and did the work. Which business do you think is better? I mean, it's pretty obvious, isn't it, right? So for him, he couldn't just eliminate the flooring company. He started to phase it out slowly as he put more energy in. At first, he coasted with it. And the way he coasted with it, what that looked like for him when he coasted with it was, he said, I'm going to let it live its own life. I'll put some attention to it just to manage it to keep it going, but I won't directly get in there and worry about that. I'm going to put my best energy in growing our fireplace business. And he did that. And over the course of about 4 or 5 years, the flooring company still stayed roughly the same profitability, a couple $100,000 a year. But his fireplace side of the business increased profitability by 300, 400, 500%. And at a certain point, what he realized was he couldn't afford to keep doing the flooring company. It just didn't make financial sense. He'd make so much more money in the other business. So he closed the flooring company. Now, he could have sold it, but he wasn't even worth the time for that, in his opinion. He was worth putting the grow bigger there. Now he had another business he started in addition to that, doing a specific servicing of duct work and vent cleaning, etc., on large apartment complexes for fire prevention and for safety. And he did this business, and this business soon eclipsed in terms of profitability and scalability. It eclipsed his fireplace company. His fireplace company was more difficult. It required more inventory. It was harder to train labor for it. It was hard to scale, whereas this one here, he had a regional sales force that would work with various apartment portfolio owners and do servicing for whole regions of their properties with that part. And eventually, where the fireplace company became 3 to 5 times more profitable than the flooring company, closed the flooring company, eventually this new company that did duct work side of work and the vent cleaning work for large apartment complexes became 3 to 5 times more profitable than the fireplace company, and he let that one go to scale in earnest his most profitable business. So, which brings me to the most important point here, is when you recognize these things of which is the most profitable, best place to focus on, you get free resources to grow and scale. So what do you mean, David? You get free resources? Yeah, I mean, this is a free lunch. When you take what you're already spending that's producing a diminished return and reinvest it in things that are giving you 50% more, 200% more, 500% more. I've got clients, they have certain parts of their business that are 1,000% more profitable, better for them than some of the other things they used to do. When you can do that, you're getting a free lunch. You're getting all your initial resources to grow and scale from the low end of this hierarchy, this pyramid, to reinvest in the things that you're going to grow and to reinvest in those things that you're going to scale in earnest with that part. Now, notice what we're ignoring. We're choosing to ignore the coast part. We're not going to take those freed up resources and put them into parts of the business that really shouldn't be put and grown. They should just be accepted that whatever they produce, we'll take that production for now, knowing that usually what happens is what you're coasting in today, down the road you'll start to phase out. What you're coasting in today, you'll probably free up more of those resources to grow and scale in other places. That's a very common pattern. I've seen that with thousands of different business coaching clients over the year. So let me bring this back to a question for you. In your business, when you think about either by your locations or by your product or service lines or the customers that you serve, where are the choice of what you should avoid or eliminate? Starting with that. And the way we do that is we compare our key breakdown by gross profit volume, gross profit margin, and look across. It's probably the easiest way. And we can look at some other variables as well, right? We can look at scalability on a scale of 1 to 5. We can look at our competitive dominance in that market space on a scale of 1 to 5. We can look at how durable that market demand for that type of product or service or that location or whatever it is would be, and gross profit. I mean, if I were doing this with a coaching client, I would probably look and score all 4 of those dimensions, and I would put it into a simple table. I would list down the, would say, for example, one of the practices we work with, medical, they had a cash pay practice in a specialty, and they had 3 different locations, 3 clinics. We had them put those locations. Okay, which of those clinics has the highest gross profit margin, right? What do they look like in terms of the ability to scale your volume at that clinic? What do they look like in terms of durability, the demand for your service in that market space, and how dominant are you in that area? What we discovered is one of his clinics for our client, he should close. And he did. He eliminated that clinic. He took and pushed about 40, 50, 60% of the volume got pushed to one of his other 2 clinics. And that meant he had a net loss of volume, but the freed up energy, not carrying all the overhead of that clinic, taking the time and drawing some of his providers away, putting all of his best marketing into the other 2 locations to grow them, and he doubled his profitability within 24 months. Now, for a medical practice that's not growing through new locations, to double its profitability in 24 months is a great result. And he did it not by working more, but by eliminating and phasing out some of the stuff that he just wasn't getting a great return on. The 3rd location that really didn't make sense to cover all that overhead of staff and the real estate overhead of the office space for the clinic, etc. So probably the most important takeaway from you, the most important coaching for you, is I want you to think about in your business, where do you think we can reduce or eliminate you wasting energy, time, talent, attention, and money on things that don't produce for you, or they produce okay, but not extraordinarily well, so that we can take the saved energy, that free lunch, so to speak, and those freed up resources and put them at our highest use places. Invariably, when we do this with a coaching client, there are 2 responses, 2 reactions. The first reaction is, oh, I couldn't do that. And I'll come back to that one in a moment. The second response is they get this, usually it's somewhere about 6 or 12 months later. Like, why didn't I do this years ago? I can't believe I waited so long to do this. Now, in terms of I can't do this, I'll give an example. We have a client, I'll call our client Eric. Again, I don't have his permission to share his direct name, but he runs a professional service firm that does consulting practice. And in this particular consulting practice, he's been doing it for some time. Now, he's got clients who are paying various hourly rates. You've got some clients who are paying about $150 per hour effectively, and all the way up to new clients who are paying roughly $250 to $300 per hour as their effective hourly. Now, some stuff he charges hourly, some stuff is done by packages, but you could reduce that to the hourly cost or that a client's paying for the professional service that they're getting. And what he finds, and this is a very common pattern, that at 150, these customers are marginal at best. He's making very little profit from them. And they're the most demanding. They tend to pay the slowest. And in almost all cases, and I see this pattern over and over again, These are the legacy customers that have been with him the longest. And so owners of businesses become very scared. They say, well, David, I can't stop servicing them because I need the business. The reality is they don't need this business. They need the profitable business over here that is twice as expensive to a customer. And because of that, same cost of goods sold is much, 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 much more profitable for the company. So what we talked about for him is how can we do a combination of strategies? How can we raise pricing for these people? We don't have to do it for all of them. We can do it for a few of them in waves to reduce our risk and to learn about how to raise the pricing better. We don't have to raise them all the way to market, but we can raise them closer to market and then make sure that they're on incremental price increases. It happens all the time with legacy clients. Customers that you had a price from 15 years ago, that maybe a few times you've raised them 3% here, 5% there, but they're still paying a fraction of what new customers would pay for the same products or services. We've got to address that. Plus, some of these people who won't step into a higher paying bracket, we should just say, you know what, we can't service you anymore. Free up that energy to go grow by getting new, better customers and clients to come in the front end. Again, it's not an either or. Some we're going to accept and we're going to coast with. We're going to deal with, maybe we do it in waves of 3. We do the first third, and then 3 months later we do the second third. So for a period, we might coast with some of those clients at the old rates. But as we do that, we're going to raise some, and some, as they're no longer willing to pay the new rates and they're not a good customer of ours, we're going to phase them out. And by doing this calculus, the end result for you with your business is you're able to be much more profitable by using the current talent, resources, capacity that you have in a better economic way. It's a really straightforward thing to do, but most business owners, they get scared. They get afraid. David, what happens if I lose my clients? Well, first of all, if they're not profitable for you, losing them is not a horrible thing. But David, they contribute to covering overhead. That's true. So we don't want to lose all of them all at once, which is why we can be strategic about it. If I've got 100 clients that I work with in my professional services firm, and let's say that a third of them are not profitable. So 33 of the 100 are not profitable in any real way. They're these low margin folks. Maybe I say, okay, of these 33 of these that I'll do, I'm going to raise 10 of them today, and then I'm going to play that one out for 90 days and see how that goes. My thought is that a portion of them will come up to the 200 or the 250 level, and a portion will fall away. And the portion that fall away will free up resources so we can spend some more energy on business development to get better new customers to come in. And then at 90 days, we'll take stock and we'll do it again and again. And by doing that part, we might have, of those 33 customers, probably 20 of them will stay with you at a much more realistic rate. And you'll probably lose 10 or 15 of those clients going out, and you'll fill them in later on. By raising the rates and by bringing in new, even if you don't fill those 33 slots with 33 new people or with that, you're still going to make a lot more money in most cases. Why? Because by raising the rate here to 200 or 225 or 250, you've taken a customer that you might have been making, a very low gross profit number. Maybe the number was in the 20% gross profit, which for a professional service firm is a kiss of death. And you push that now to 50 or 55%. Whereas new customers coming in, they might be at 65 or 70% gross profit. But that combination means I don't need as much volume to be a lot more profitable. And so by doing this way incrementally, you're able to make your business much better. So I'm going to bring it back full circle here. When I look at my business, what am I doing right now that I should either avoid altogether or eliminate that we do? What strategic decisions should we make about that? What products or services or product lines or service lines, what locations, what market spaces, what type of customers, what customers themselves should we not service? Which should we phase out, diversify away from over time? Which should we keep but coast, give it our secondary resources, not our very best people? Give it good people because it's a good opportunity, but not our best people. Over time, that things that we're coasting on, many of them will phase out, as the things that we're growing or scaling become more and more profitable and more successful for you. When we do this pattern out with business clients that we have, what we notice is that over time, their gross profit margin shoots way up. Over time, their total revenues climb and skyrocket. And most importantly of all, the bottom line profitability goes up manyfold from where they were. This is how they'll double, triple, 5x, 10x or more their bottom line profitability over the course of 3, 5, 7, or 10 years with that part, because they're upgrading the value they're bringing to the marketplace. And when you do that, that's what your business is getting paid for. Your business is there to get paid for profitably producing value for the market in a scalable way. And to do that, you need your best attention, your best time, your best talent, and your money to be there to support those fewer things that you want to grow and scale on the top end of that pyramid. I hope you use today as a spark, a spur to help you grow your business more effectively, more intelligently. Thanks for joining us for The Business Coach. As always, if there's some way that my staff and I can help you scale your business better, more successfully, just reach out, right? Reach out to us. We'd be happy to see how we could help. Even if that means doing a free coaching session with you, just to help get you unstuck. And as a side note, it's a way to try out the fit to see if perhaps we're right to work with each other down the road. Thank you for joining me today. I wish you every success as you scale your company.